I found out my boyfriend was cheating because his mistress sent me a thank you message for sharing him so gracefully. I didn't even know who she was talking about at first. I thought it was spam or a prank. Then she attached a photo. Here's how it happened. We'd been together almost 4 years. Not dramatic, not toxic, just solid. The kind of relationship people point to and say, that's what healthy looks like. He was thoughtful, predictable, safe, which is probably why I ignored the small things. The late gym sessions, the phone always face down, the sudden obsession with cologne he'd never worn before. None of it screamed cheating. It just whispered it. The message came in on a random Tuesday afternoon. Unknown number, casual tone. Hey, I just wanted to say thanks. I know sharing isn't easy, but you've been really understanding. I stared at it for a full minute before replying. Sorry, who is this? She responded instantly, like she'd been waiting. Oh, I'm Alex's girlfriend. My stomach dropped. I wrote back, I think you have the wrong number. She sent the photo. It was him, shirtless. In a mirror I recognized, not mine, but one from a hotel we'd stayed at months earlier. Same wallpaper, same lamp, same smile he only used when he thought no one was watching. I asked her how long. She said, almost a year. A year. That meant birthdays, holidays, family dinners, all while he was living a second life I didn't know existed. I asked why she messaged me. She said, because he told me you knew, that you were okay with it, that you two had an arrangement I'd never agreed to. She thought I was the calm, mature girlfriend who'd stepped aside. I was actually the idiot who'd been kept in the dark. She apologized, but not the way you'd expect. She said, if I'd known you didn't consent, I wouldn't have stayed. I don't want to be that person. That hurt more than anything, because even his mistress had more respect for me than he did. I confronted him that night. He didn't deny it. He said, I didn't think it mattered since I never stopped loving you. That's when I realized the scariest kind of cheater isn't the reckless one. It's the one who convinces himself he's still a good person. And I hadn't even asked the question that would change everything yet. I didn't yell. That seemed to confuse him more than anything else. He stood there, waiting for the explosion he clearly deserved, while I just stared at him like I was trying to memorize a stranger's face. I asked him one question. Did you ever plan to tell me? He hesitated, just for a second, but that second told me everything. He said, I didn't want to hurt you, which is always the lie cheaters tell when they mean, I didn't want to deal with the consequences. I asked how long he thought this could go on. He shrugged, literally shrugged. He said he thought it would fizzle out, that eventually he'd get bored or she'd get bored, and things would go back to normal, as if betrayal has an expiration date. I asked him why her. He said she made him feel wanted in a way that felt easy. No expectations, no history, no accountability, just attention on demand. I reminded him that I'd been there through everything. Job loss, anxiety, family issues, the months where he barely spoke and I picked up the emotional slack without complaining. He nodded, like he agreed. Then he said something that still makes my chest tighten. That's kind of the problem. You were always there. It stopped feeling exciting. That's when the anger finally hit. Not loud anger, cold anger. I realized he hadn't cheated because he was unhappy. He cheated because he was comfortable, because stability felt boring to someone who confused chaos with passion. I asked if he loved her. He said no. I asked if he'd slept with her. He said yes. I asked if he'd ever slept with me on nights he'd just come back from her place. He didn't answer. Silence can be an answer too. I told him I'd spoken to her, that she'd told me everything. That's when panic crossed his face for the first time. He asked what she'd said. I told him the truth, that she thought I knew, that she believed she was participating in something consensual. He muttered, I didn't mean for it to get this complicated. I asked him if he'd lied to her the same way he'd lied to me. He said yes. 2 women. Same story. Same manipulation. Different excuses. I told him to leave. He asked if this meant we were done. That question almost made me laugh. I told him I needed time, not to forgive him, but to decide what kind of ending he deserved. Because love doesn't disappear overnight, but trust can die in a single sentence. And I hadn't yet decided what to do with the body. I didn't kick him out that night, and that's the part people judge me for when I tell this story. He slept on the couch. I locked the bedroom door. I lay awake until sunrise staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship like it was evidence in a trial I didn't know I was going to lose. Here's the uncomfortable truth no one talks about. When someone betrays you like that, you don't immediately stop loving them. You stop trusting reality. Every memory starts rotting from the inside. The vacations, the late night talks, the times he held me while I cried and told me I was safe. I kept wondering which version of him had been real. The man who cheated, or the man who built a life with me. The next morning, he acted normal. Too normal. He made coffee, asked if I wanted breakfast, tried to talk about next steps like this was a business problem we could negotiate our way out of. That's when something inside me snapped. I realized he wasn't scared of losing me. He was scared of losing comfort. So I did something I hadn't planned. I told him I'd forgive him. Not immediately, not fully, but I told him I wanted to try. The relief on his face was instant, disgusting, almost childlike. He promised therapy, transparency, boundaries, everything cheaters promise when they think they've escaped consequences. And for a few weeks, I let him believe it worked. I watched him over-explain where he was going. I watched him flinch every time his phone buzzed. I watched him perform remorse like a role he hadn't rehearsed enough. During that time, I did my own work. Quietly, I separated our finances. I gathered screenshots, messages, timelines. I found out the truth about things he'd never admitted. Other lies, smaller betrayals, moments I'd brushed off because I trusted him. Turns out the affair wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. Then came the night that ended everything. We were at a small dinner with friends, laughing, normal again. He reached for my hand under the table like nothing had ever happened. And suddenly I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no love, just clarity. When we got home, I told him I was done. He laughed at first, thought I was joking. Then he saw my face. I told him forgiveness wasn't the same as reconciliation, that I didn't want revenge. I wanted freedom that hurt him more than screaming ever could. He cried, begged, said he'd change. I told him I believed him, but I also believed he'd always need chaos to feel alive. And I refused to be collateral damage in someone else's boredom. He moved out the next day. Weeks later, I heard he tried to go back to her. She said no. Apparently, she didn't want a man who only chose her when he ran out of places to hide. And here's the part that still messes with me. Sometimes I miss him, not who he was, but who I thought he was. And maybe that's the real betrayal. Not that he cheated, but that he let me fall in love with a version of him that never existed. If this ending hit uncomfortably close, you're not alone. These stories don't end clean, they end honestly. Subscribe if you want more real, messy, uncomfortable relationship stories that people are afraid to admit out loud. I found out she was cheating because the other guy thanked me. Not angrily, not sarcastically, genuinely. He sent me a message that just said, "I didn't know she was taken. I am sorry, ma'am." And in that moment, my entire relationship collapsed into a single sentence. Here's how it happened. We'd been together a little over 3 years. Not the flashy kind of relationship people post about, but the quiet, everyday kind. Shared routines, inside jokes, arguments that ended with silence instead of shouting. The kind of relationship where you assume loyalty because nothing ever feels dramatic enough to question it. She was consistent, predictable, almost boring in the best way, which is why I trusted her completely. Looking back, the first shift was subtle. She didn't become distant. She didn't pick fights. She actually became nicer, more patient, more affectionate. She started checking in more often, asking how my day was, remembering small details she'd usually forget. At the time, I thought we'd entered a better phase. I didn't realize she was managing guilt. She started guarding her phone differently, not hiding it, just repositioning it. Screen down instead of up, notifications off instead of on. She never panicked if I touched it, which somehow made me trust her even more. That was the trap. When someone acts suspicious, you notice. When they act calm, you relax. She told me she'd made a new friend at work. A guy. I didn't care. I wasn't insecure, and she'd never given me a reason to be. She talked about him casually. Too casually. Like he was irrelevant. That's usually when he isn't. The night everything cracked, she fell asleep before me. Phone still in her hand. That almost never happened. I didn't plan to look. I wasn't snooping. I just went to plug her charger in so her phone wouldn't die overnight. That's when it lit up. A message preview. Not sexual. Not explicit. Just 4 words. I miss you already. From a name I didn't recognize. I froze. Not because of what it said, but because of how normal it sounded. Comfortable. Familiar. Like something that had been said many times before. I didn't wake her. I didn't confront her. I just stared at the screen until it went dark again. The next morning, I acted normal. She kissed me goodbye, asked what I wanted for dinner, told me she loved me, and for the first time in our relationship, I wondered how many of those words were real, and how many were maintenance. I spent the entire day spiraling quietly, running through scenarios, making excuses for her, convincing myself it was innocent. By the time I got home, I decided not to bring it up. That's when my phone buzzed. A message request from a stranger. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. The first line was polite. The second line was devastating. And by the third line, I realized I wasn't about to hear her side of the story first. I was about to hear his. And nothing prepares you for finding out you're the last person who knew you were being betrayed. The message wasn't long, but it felt like it weighed 100 pounds. He said he'd found my profile accidentally, that he'd seen a photo of me and her together from months ago, that it didn't sit right with him, so he wanted to be honest before things went any further. That's when I realized something sickening. Things had already gone further. He explained that they'd been seeing each other for almost 5 months. Not a one-time mistake, not a drunk hookup, a routine, lunches, late-night talks, inside jokes that clearly weren't ours anymore. He told me he'd asked her more than once if she was single. She told him yes, every time. He said he felt stupid, used, like he'd been playing a role without knowing the script. He apologized again, even though none of this was his fault. I didn't reply right away. Couldn't. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone on the couch and just sat there, staring at the wall like something might rearrange itself if I waited long enough. When she got home, she was smiling, talking about her day, complaining about traffic, completely unaware that everything she was saying sounded like noise to me now. I asked her how her friend from work was doing. She didn't hesitate. She smiled and said, "Oh, he's good. Why?" That smile will haunt me forever, because it was real, effortless, practiced. I asked if there was anything she wanted to tell me. She tilted her head, genuinely confused. Like what? So I told her I'd gotten a message. Her face didn't drop immediately. First came confusion, then calculation, then something like resignation. She didn't deny it. She didn't cry. She just sighed and sat down across from me like this was a meeting she'd been expecting. She told me it wasn't supposed to happen like this, that it started emotionally, that she never meant to hurt me, that she'd been planning to tell me soon, Soon is the most dangerous word in a relationship. She said she felt neglected, that things between us had become predictable, that she didn't feel chosen anymore. I asked her why she stayed if she felt that way. She said, "Because leaving felt worse." That sentence hit harder than the cheating. She explained how she compartmentalized it. How with me she had stability, history, comfort, and with him excitement, validation, attention. She said she never compared us. That was a lie. I could hear it in the way she said his name. I asked her if she loved him. She said she didn't know. I asked her if she loved me. She hesitated. And in that pause, I realized something brutal. Cheating isn't always about choosing someone else. Sometimes it's about refusing to choose at all. She admitted she thought she could figure it out quietly, that she'd eventually know who she wanted more, that she'd make a clean decision once she was sure. I wasn't her partner. I was her safety net. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing she'd been emotionally preparing to leave me long before I ever suspected a thing. And I still hadn't heard the part she was most afraid to say, the reason she never ended things sooner. She sat there for a long time before saying it, not crying, not shaking, just staring at her hands like she was deciding whether honesty was worth the damage it would cause. Then she said, "I was waiting to see who I'd miss more." That sentence didn't feel real at first. It felt like something out of a bad movie, something no one actually admits out loud. But she meant it. She told me she imagined life without me. The silence, the empty apartment, the routines breaking apart. And it scared her, not because she loved me so deeply, but because she didn't know who she was without me there. Then she imagined life without him. And that scared her too, because he made her feel wanted in a way she hadn't felt in years. So instead of choosing, she delayed. Weeks later, I heard through mutual friends that she tried to make it work with him. It didn't last. Turns out, when you build a relationship on indecision, it collapses the moment someone finally chooses themselves. And sometimes the real betrayal isn't cheating. It's staying just long enough to destroy someone quietly. If the story messed with your head, made you angry, or hit a little too close to home, subscribe. These stories don't end clean, and neither do the lessons. I found out she was cheating because she asked me to help her choose between two men, and didn't realize one of them was me. She was calm, casual, almost amused, like she wasn't talking about ruining someone's life. And the worst part? I didn't even understand what she meant at first. Here's how it happened. We'd been married for 6 years. Not newlyweds, not falling apart either. The kind of marriage that settles into habits. Same coffee mugs, same sides of the bed, same arguments on repeat. Comfortable, a little numb, but stable. At least that's what I thought. She'd been working late a lot. Not suspicious late. Just late enough that dinner went cold and conversations got postponed. She said her job was stressful. I believed her. Stress makes people distant. I'd seen that before. What I hadn't seen before was how detached she'd become emotionally. She wasn't mean. She wasn't cold. She was neutral, like she'd already stepped halfway out of the relationship and was waiting for the rest of her body to catch up. The night everything shifted, we were sitting on the couch, half watching a show neither of us cared about. She muted the TV suddenly and turned to me with this thoughtful expression. She said, "Can I ask you something without you getting mad?" That sentence never leads anywhere good. She said she had a friend who was confused about her relationship, a woman at work. Apparently this friend was torn between staying with her husband or exploring something new with another man. She asked me what advice I'd give her. I told her cheating was wrong, that if you're unhappy, you leave before you start something else, that dragging two people along is selfish. She nodded, took it all in. Then she asked, "What if she loves them both?" I laughed a little. I thought it was hypothetical. I said love isn't about feelings, it's about choices, that you choose who you're loyal to. She went quiet after that. Too quiet. Then she said, "Okay, But what if the husband feels safe and the other guy feels exciting? I looked at her then, really looked at her. She wasn't asking for a friend. She was testing reactions. I asked her why she was asking me this. She shrugged and said, "I just think people oversimplify cheating. Sometimes it's not about betrayal. Sometimes it's about clarity." That word again, clarity. That's when the room felt different, like something invisible had been dragged into the space between us. I asked her directly if she was talking about herself. She smiled, not nervously, not guiltily, just calmly, and said, "I didn't say that." But she didn't say no either. Later that night, after she went to bed, I sat alone replaying the conversation over and over, realizing something terrifying. She wasn't afraid of hurting me. She was afraid of choosing wrong. And I was starting to understand that I might not be the choice she was leaning toward. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. Same routine, same coffee, same quick kiss before work. It almost made me wonder if I'd imagined the whole conversation, if I'd read too much into a harmless philosophical question. But the words stuck to me all day. Safe, exciting, clarity. Those aren't neutral words. Those are categories. And no one starts categorizing their partner unless they're already comparing. That evening, I didn't wait for another hypothetical. I asked her directly if there was someone else. She didn't deny it. She didn't confirm it either. She said, "Does it matter if nothing physical has happened?" That's when I realized she'd already rewritten the rules in her head. She explained that she'd met someone through work, that he made her feel seen, that conversations flowed easily, that she felt lighter around him. She said it wasn't an affair, just an emotional connection. I asked how long it had been going on. She said, "A while. A while is a long time when you're lying next to someone every night." She told me she never planned for it to happen, that it grew slowly, that she didn't notice the line until she was already standing on the other side of it. Then she said something that still makes my stomach turn. She said, "I wanted your perspective because you know me best. I trust you." She trusted me to help her decide whether to leave me. I asked her what she wanted. She said she wanted honesty, space, time to think. I asked if she loved him. She hesitated, not because she didn't know, but because she knew saying it would change everything. She said she cared deeply, that he represented a version of herself she felt she'd lost. That with him, she wasn't someone's wife. She was just herself. That hurt more than any insult. I asked if she'd end things with him. She asked if I could give her time first. Time, apparently, was the currency she felt entitled to spend, even if it cost me my dignity. She started sleeping in the guest room to think. She said it wasn't fair to pretend everything was normal while she sorted out her feelings. But it was fair to leave me in limbo. Days passed, then weeks. She grew calmer, more centered, like someone who'd already made peace with a decision she hadn't shared yet. And one night, she asked me the question that finally broke whatever hope I had left. She asked, "If I chose him, would you hate me?" In that moment, I understood the truth. She wasn't asking for permission. She was rehearsing the ending. And I was the only one still pretending this was a conversation instead of a slow, deliberate goodbye. I didn't answer her question, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I realized she didn't actually care what it was. She'd already separated herself emotionally. This was just the final paperwork. A few days later, she told me she wanted to try with him. Not commit, not promise, just try. As if our marriage had been a draft she was ready to revise. She said she hoped I'd understand. I asked her one last thing. If he hadn't existed, would she have stayed with me? She paused. Then she said, "I think I would have still been unhappy." That was the moment everything became clear. She didn't leave because she loved him. She left because she'd already decided I wasn't enough, and he just gave her the courage to act on it. She moved out the next weekend. No screaming, no courtroom drama, Just boxes, quiet footsteps, and the sound of a life being dismantled without ceremony. A month later, she reached out. She said she missed our conversations, that she felt guilty, that she hoped I was doing okay. She also said something that still feels cruel in its honesty. She said, "I didn't think it would hurt this much. Not hurting me, hurting her." I didn't reply. 6 months later, I ran into her by accident. She looked thinner, tired, less sure of herself. She told me things hadn't worked out the way she'd imagined. That choosing excitement over stability came with consequences she hadn't anticipated. She asked if I'd ever consider talking again. I told her no, not because I hated her, but because I finally understood my value. Love isn't asking someone to wait while you decide if they're worth choosing. It's choosing them even when it's hard. And sometimes the most devastating betrayal isn't cheating. It's turning your partner into an option. If the story hit harder than you expected, subscribe. These endings don't come with neat resolutions, just truths most people don't want to hear.